You're watching WisWomen. I'm your host, Jodie Arnold. Today on the show, we have Dr. Emily Anderson, writer, editor, and Eau Claire City Council District 2 member. Thank you for being on the show today, Emily.
Thanks for having me. This is a great idea.
We met outside of this show, and I know that you're a writer, and I'm a writer, and I'm curious to know what it's like to be a writer who's also working in politics, and like, where did those two things collide, and do you think that being a writer has helped you at all in the political process?
Yeah, I think those things are more related than we usually give them credit for. I feel like we tend to think in our culture of there's like serious things and they're like business and politics and technology, and then we tend to think of writing and the arts as like this extra thing that maybe people do on the side if there's time or if there's money. But I think that the opposite is actually true. I think so much of everything that happens in those big important fields like business and politics has to do with writing, with argumentation, with persuasion, and even with poetry, in the sense that if you think of poetry as that feeling of you're being moved, or something in you is stirred by a song you're hearing on the radio, or something you see in a movie, or even a commercial you see on TV, you see how important writing and the arts are to politics and business, because that's advertising or that's political propaganda. And those things are shaping our world more today, I think, than even ever before with our media. So I think that it's really important to have writers and artists working in fields like politics, because I think that our voice of being able to say, okay, what you're saying, that rhetoric you're using is appealing to emotion in a way that I really identify with, but actually isn't in the best interests of my constituents. And being able to separate those things out is important for everybody. So I guess that's my argument for more writers in government and more humanities education for everybody.
And was this, when you ran for office, was this the first time you had done that?
Oh yeah.
And really?
Yeah.
And before that, had you volunteered for campaigns, or were?
Yeah, I mean, I'd always done things like gone door-to-door canvassing, and actually Kathleen Vinehout came here to speak maybe a year ago, right after I had decided to run for office, and she said, okay, what we need to do is get people that don't vote to vote, people that do vote to put a yard sign in their yard, people that have yard signs in their yards to go door knocking, and people that go door knocking to run for office. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was that was the next step.
Yeah.
But democracy is amazing because it really is something that everybody can get involved in and take step by step, and then all of a sudden you're doing something you never thought you would do.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
So when you and I were chatting, one thing I know that we both felt very strongly about was how amazing it is that there's this insurgence of arts in the Eau Claire area. And suddenly there's just a ton of venues for music, there's murals being painted, you definitely get a feeling that this is like an arts city. Mm-hmm. But we both agreed that it's not necessarily an artist-friendly city. So what barriers are there, as far as Eau Claire city policies go? Are there obstacles right now that are keeping this from being a more artist-friendly city?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the main barriers that are in place to having Eau Claire be an artist-friendly city are barriers that really impact everybody in the city. And that is, we have a problem with affordable housing, and we have a problem with having wages where one person's income can support a family. And that's something shared across the state and across the nation. And I think that city policies definitely could be adjusted to change that. But what's stopping us is state policies. There's something called preemption laws, where the state will say, oh, we're taking away the power of cities to make changes that people in their community want.
Yeah.
For instance, we had with the county board, they had passed a resolution that anybody that contracts with the county, everybody who works for them has to be paid a living wage.
Yeah.
Well, the state came in after that had already, been passed. The people had voted and elected those people that made that decision, and the state said, no, it doesn't matter, what you guys in Eau Claire voted for. We're taking over from here, and you can't do that anymore. So I think that we really need to get together and fight for some local control on these issues if we want to truly be an artist-friendly city.
So an artist-friendly city to you is a city in which people can actively do art as something that's not just a side gig and
Absolutely.
instead can be your job.
Yeah, exactly. Your art can be your job, or maybe if you're not making money off your art, you can actually support yourself on your day job. And that's an issue that, if, whether you identify as an artist or not, being able to support yourself on, in a situation where any job you get is a good job, that's important for everybody. And so I would love to see a situation where artists could, one, make money from their work that they do, but also, if they're not at that place yet, be able to afford to have a good quality of life and make art and be part of a community while only working one job.
And if you had a vision of, let's say, just anything could go, okay? As far as what an artist-friendly city looks like, what do you see as things that we could do to make it easier for people? I know when you and I had been chatting, you had mentioned something a really cool idea about housing, even, and things like that.
I would love to, work with different local groups to think about how we could have artist residencies or artist housing, or figure out ways that artists could be integrated into neighborhoods, and in exchange for doing, say, some, workshops or something like that. They could have, free housing for a year while they're getting, their work off the ground. And the same could also be, a deal for entrepreneurs, for instance, or other people that really want to innovate. But in order to innovate, you need a safety net. You can't just risk everything. That's too much to ask of people. But if you give a little bit of safety and security, people can do remarkable things and take risks that really pay off for the whole community.
Yeah, I like that. And speaking of arts, you're a writer, and you have a PhD in writing, which is really groovy. And I know that you have a book coming out in October.
Yes.
And it's a young adult book.
It is.
And it's called 15 and Change?
Yes.
Okay, so what's it about? How did that start? And maybe if you have time, what is it like? How do you manage your time between doing city council and also having to still be a writer? I know it's a lot of questions.
No, it's great. So 15 and Change is coming out under my pseudonym, which is Maxwell Howard, which is my two grandpas' names or whatever. It was my first YA novel, and I didn't plan on writing a YA novel, but I kind of heard about an opportunity. A press was looking for young adult books on the social issues, and so I kind of got this idea based on experiences I had many years ago working for Papa John's in Eau Claire. So it takes place in a pizza restaurant, and that's where the similarities end. But yeah. I learned about cheese lock, which is where you build a dam of cheese to keep the sauce from sliding around at Papa John's. So that makes an appearance in the book. Anyway, so it's about a young man who gets kind of swept up in the Fight for 15 movement while he is making pizzas at a pizza place. So that book is coming out in October, and I'm really excited about it. It's told in poems, which is a little bit different. It's many short poems that add up to be a narrative.
Really?
So, yeah.
Oh, so the whole book is these poems?
Yeah, really short poems.
Do any of them include the banana pepper that was in the Papa John's?
Yes, many do. There's a character who is the manager, and you can always hear him if he's lurking behind you, because he's constantly crunching on banana peppers. So if you hear a crunch, you just know that he's lurking,
And how do you manage writing when you have I know that the idea of writing in politics needs to collide more often, so that it's not a collision so much anymore. It's just a collaboration of these different things. But how do you manage to do both of those things? Is city council, have you found it more difficult to do creative stuff now that you have this other life?
Yeah, I'm really trying to adapt that. I feel as a writer, for me, and I think for a lot of artists, you really need a lot of downtime and a lot of time to kind of be just thinking about stuff. And I'm having a lot more meetings and a lot more stuff to do. So I'm really trying to just protect my morning time, and try to make that writing time, and then trying scheduling my city council stuff later. But I am also thinking that they do feed each other in some ways. The skills are writing has to do a lot of observing and listening, which are really close to city council kind of skills as you learn about an issue, researching. Yeah. And evaluating lots of different kinds of information. They're really similar skills, so I think there's a way that they reinforce each other too.
Okay, and I know also that you have a current book project about Little House on the Prairie. and its role in American life and culture.
Yes.
Okay, real quick, where are you in the process with that? Is this something like you're working with a publisher on?
Not yet. Right now, I wrote my dissertation on that topic, and I'm right now pitching that a nonfiction book project about that topic to agents. And so hopefully one of them will accept it, and then I will get paid to finish the book, which would be ideal. But it looks at the way that Little House on the Prairie has impacted our sense of who we are in America and who we are as Midwesterners. And one of the ways that you can tell that is because immigrants to North America and to the Midwest specifically have taken Little House on the Prairie and adapted it to tell stories about what it means to be an immigrant today. For instance, there is a blog in Minneapolis by a woman who was born in Laos and came as a refugee to the US in the 1980s. And it's called Little Laos on the Prairie, and it's kind of a global platform for Lao people living around the world to think about what it means to be both Lao and also American, or Lao and Midwestern.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that Little House on the Prairie is kind of a little bit of a model for that, because it's also a story about, somebody risking everything and taking off for a new land and trying to hold on to their values that they brought with them while trying to adapt to a new place.
And that's so timely, just considering on a larger scale, like the debate and conversation we're having about immigration right now, and just remembering what it means to be an immigrant. And
Absolutely.
Like when I think of Little House on the Prairie, I think of that. And real quick, what are you reading right now on your own time?
Let's see. I have a bunch of half-read books piled
Yeah,
everywhere.
me too.
I'm reading a book also about, this is so going to be depressing, I'm reading a bunch of books about the Nazi Germany right now. So I'm reading a book called Defying Hitler, which is a memoir of what it was like in the 1930s in Germany. It's really fascinating and really depressing, and I recommend it.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Good luck on your book project, and I'll see you next time. This has been WisWomen. I'm your host, Jodie Arnold. See you next time.